doing our assignments?
I did.
Oh, awesome. How about you, Wade?
I read my notes. I didn't read. I didn't watch the video
Oh, that you know to be so comprehensive. Oh.
again. Not really, sir. Just straight to the point. Key notes.
Okay, okay. So always try to go again to listen to the recording. There's no limitation on the number of times you can listen to the recording. It's available for you. It's available to you. So please try as much as possible to listen to the recording, so that what might seem not so clear to you will become much more clear. Because if you listen to the recording, you would have seen that you ought to do a SWOT analysis for your competitors when doing your competitor profiling. Do you understand? All right. Thank you so much, guys. Today we'll be looking at requirement elicitation. Requirement elicitation. Some people, due to the flair of pronunciation, also call it requirement elicitation, right? Elicitation. So it's very interesting when you are in a room or when you're talking with your fellow business analyst. I think 2 weeks ago, right? Either 2 weeks ago or last week, Wednesday. It could be last week, Wednesday, or 2 weeks, Wednesday ago. I had a study group. I facilitated a study group session for IIBA Nigeria. IIBA is International Institute of Business Analysis. So it's the #1 certifying international body for business analysts worldwide. So I'm a director in the Nigerian chapter. So I facilitated a workshop session where we looked at requirement elicitation, right? That was strictly for those people that want to write CBAB. So it was a 1 hour session, and while I was talking, I made it open for people to make comments, ask questions, and all of that. And you see your fellow business analysts also coming with their own variants of pronunciation as requirement elicitation. Some say requirement elicitation, some say requirement elicitation. So even before we go into the class, I'd like to know, how do you think we should pronounce it? Should it be requirement elicitation or requirement elicitation? What do you guys think?
Elicitation is fine by
Requirement
me.
elicitation. Elicitation.
Okay. All right. No problem. You are with me then. I believe it should be requirement elicitation, but some school of thoughts believe it should be elicitation. So requirement elicitation, that is what we know it in a professional term, or should I say, according to the Babok guide, we know it as requirement elicitation, right? But when you come to the streets, right? When you come to the streets, just like in today's world, they'll tell you, when you go to the office, this is what we call it. But when you come to the streets, this is what we call it, right? So when you come to the street, and what I mean by street is when you come to the playing ground where these things are actually done, nobody actually calls it requirement elicitation. All we call it is requirement gathering or data gathering, right? But according to standardization, according to the Babok guide, Babok is business analysis body of knowledge. According to the Babok guide, V3, it is called requirement elicitation. And that is because requirement elicitation is much more encompassing than just requirement gathering. Requirement gathering has to do with gathering requirements, right? Gathering them, capturing requirements from every place, is capture requirements, gather requirements. That is what requirements gathering basically talks about, right? But requirement elicitation goes deeper to talk about discovering requirements from places you don't even expect to discover them. So it's much more beyond gathering them, but now discovering those requirements. Even after you've discovered the requirements, communicating the requirements, right? And then carrying stakeholders along in terms of collaboration, of what you have elicited from the requirement. So that is what requirement elicitation is talking about, and that is why it's much more encompassing than what we do in the street called requirements gathering. So today we'll be looking at requirement elicitation. And a requirement elicitation, we'll be talking about what is requirement elicitation, right? In terms of what is requirement, so why should we actually elicit requirements? What we need to do to prepare for elicitation, right? They say whoever fails to plan plans to fail, right? So if you don't prepare in terms of planning for your elicitation, you're basically going to fail in that elicitation activity. Then we also look at how do we carry out elicitation? What technique do we use? I don't know if it is your cohorts or the previous cohorts, but I used to say this thing in all of my cohorts. I don't know if I've said it, but let me say it today. Business analysis is basically three things. If you understand these three things, these three divisions, you will be able to understand business analysis and every other career in the world. Everything about career has just three aspects. Number one is the skill, right? Understanding the skill, getting the skill. Two is knowledge, right? And three is tools and techniques. Or you can assume the knowledge to be the skill as well. Then two is tools and three is technique. What do I mean? In business analysis, everything we do falls into knowledge or skills, tools and techniques. So requirement elicitation is a skill, is a knowledge in business analysis, right? Requirement elicitation is a skill and knowledge in business analysis. Which tools do we use to elicit requirements? We have several tools we use to elicit requirements. The tools you are using could be your pen, your biro, your jotter. Your guidelines and tools could be your stakeholder collaboration and all of that. These are the tools you are using. What technique are you using to elicit that requirement? It could be through interview. It could be through survey. It could be through prototyping. It could be through workshop. These are techniques you are using. So if you understand the skill or the knowledge, and you understand the tools, and you understand the techniques, you can basically do everything and anything that has to do with that particular task. And this applies to other areas as well. For instance, when you're talking about, I want to analyze requirements, right? I want to analyze requirements and communicate it to stakeholder. What tools or knowledge do you need? You need, so what skills or knowledge you need? You need the skill of requirement analysis. So you need to understand what it means to analyze a requirement, or what it means for a requirement to be correct or well written or characterized, right? Now, what tools do you need? You need your documentation tools. So you need your FRD as a tool to help you, right? You need your user story tools. Now, what technique do you use? You're using your non-functional requirements and your functional requirements. You're using your what do you call it now? Your acceptance criteria, your epics, your use cases, and use case diagrams, even your process flow. That is the technique you're using to analyze your requirements. So in business analysis, if you have not said this to you guys before, I'm saying it now and have it at the back of your mind. It has to do with the skill or the knowledge, the tools, and also the techniques that are being used. So we're talking about requirements elicitation today. We need to understand the knowledge of what requirement elicitation is, what skill, how do we elicit requirement, what is requirement elicitation, right? What tools do I need to prepare for elicitation? And then how do I actually do the elicitation? So what are the elicitation techniques that I use in carrying out my elicitation? So we'll dive right in. But first, before we start, we want to understand what is requirement elicitation. So requirement elicitation basically is a process of discovering and researching the requirements of a system from users, researching the requirements of a system from customers and from other stakeholders, right? So simply put, requirement elicitation could be the process of discovering, identifying, researching requirements of a particular solution or of a particular change or of a particular initiative from stakeholders. Stakeholders involves users, customers, sponsor, project managers, domain subject matter experts, implementation subject matter experts, all of that. And the goal of requirements elicitation is to thoroughly identify the business needs, the risks that are involved, and assumptions associated with any given initiative. That is the goal of requirement elicitation. What are the needs of the business? Where can I get information about the needs of the business? Most likely the project sponsor, right? Most likely your client. So let's say, for instance, Uptrust is trying to build an e-learning portal, right, for Access Bank. So the Access Bank can use it to be administering internal training for their staff, right? What is the business need for Access Bank as a whole? Access Bank's business need could be probably they want to cut down the cost of training. Maybe Access Bank has been contracting an external training company to train their staff every year, and they could be spending close to almost 5 billion naira or 500 million naira in that. Or probably Access Bank has a contract with Udacity or Udemy or even LinkedIn Learn, right, to offer trainings or to give their staffs access to curated trainings that will help them on the job. And Access Bank have seen that this investment is so much, but yielding little results. So we want something we can basically track in-house. So the business need for Access Bank would be to see how to cut down the costs of training or cut down the cost of staff development, to see how to monitor and track staff improvement, to see how to improve staff engagement, to see how to improve staff motivation. Do you understand? This could be the business needs of Access Bank. So as a business analyst trying to elicit requirements for this particular initiative, for this particular solution from your client being Access Bank, you need to understand what are the business needs, because it's the business need that will drive every other thing in that particular project. If when we finish building that e-learning portal for Access Bank and they are unable to cut down costs over the course of 2 years, they are unable to achieve all of that, then we have failed on the business. It means that the solution is not delivering value to stakeholders. So at first, what we do as business analysts is to identify the business needs through requirement elicitation, is to identify the business process. How will that business or how will that initiative carry, or what are the processes involved in that business, right? Is to identify the risk. What risks do we stand to gain, right? What are the assumptions for that particular initiative? That is what, or those are some of the things that requirement elicitation will help us to understand in an initiative, in a project. And the beautiful thing about requirement elicitation is that requirement elicitation is an ongoing continuous task throughout the life cycle of a project. So requirement elicitation is not something that you will do and you will stop. Just like when we have requirement business analysis planning and monitoring, you just plan your approach and then you work with that approach that you've planned. But for requirement elicitation, you don't just do it once, you continually do your requirement elicitation. The only difference might be that the magnitude of what you did in the first phase will be greater than what you've done, what you're going to be doing in the second phase, right? So that is what requirement elicitation is all about. And we are going to dive in to understand how do we prepare for elicitation. We want to elicit requirement. How do we prepare for elicitation? So in preparing for elicitation, there are basically 5 things we need to know, we need to do. Number 1 is to understand the scope of your elicitation. What is the scope of elicitation? What technique will I be going or will I be choosing or selecting for my elicitation? What logistics do I need, right? What logistics do I need to set up for this elicitation to be successful? What supporting materials do I need, right? So you want to go for elicitation with Access Bank, right? They are your clients for the e-learning portal. What supporting materials do you need? You need supporting materials in terms of reports, their training report from the HR. You need supporting materials as in terms of their training plans from the HR. You need supporting materials in terms of HR policy, right? So you need policy materials as a supporting material to help you understand what is the learning and development policy of Access Bank. That will help you to know the right questions to ask from your stakeholders. And then after you have secured the supporting materials, you then need to prepare your stakeholders. Preparing your stakeholders has to do with educating, enlightening, providing understanding to your stakeholders so that they are aligned on what you want to do. I've been to a requirements elicitation during my early days as a business analyst, whereby I went for that requirement elicitation and the stakeholder began to ask me, this requirements gathering that you're talking about, what do you want to achieve with it? Why do you want to do requirement gathering? What do you want to achieve from us? Why do you want to ask us questions? Because at that point, the client, that is the person to provide me information, was feeling maybe I was coming to know what journalists used to do now, to come and investigate and interview you so that anything you say I can use it against you, or I can tell it to management. So the client was basically finical. That is the stakeholder within that client's organization was basically finical of, why is this guy coming to interview me? Hope after I finish talking now, they're not going to tell the company that this and that, right? But being able to educate in terms of preparing your stakeholders is very important for you in the process of requirement elicitation. This will help your stakeholders to have a good understanding of what you want to do and what you want to achieve. So let's take each and every one of them one piece after the other. Understanding the scope of elicitation. In understanding the scope of elicitation, as a business analyst, you will need to have a better understanding of the scope of the elicitation technique or the elicitation activity you are about to perform. And in understanding the scope of your elicitation, you need to have a good grasp of the domain of that business. So if the business or the solution you're trying to implement for that client is an e-learning portal, right? You need to do a research. You need to ask questions to understand, what does it mean? What does an e-learning portal mean, right? And also, your client works in a financial services firm. What kind of trainings or what kind of policies or what kind of activities occur within the financial services industry? So understanding the business domain is very important for you. People say that business analysts are like mini domain subject matter experts because you have worked in different domains. So understanding the business domain is very important, is key to a successful understanding of the scope. Identifying and understanding your stakeholder location. So where are your stakeholders located? What is our point of contact? Where are they? That will help you as well. having a good understanding of the overall corporate culture and environment of that particular client or that particular solution or initiative that you are going to be working on. Understanding who stakeholders are and how they are involved. So, how are stakeholders involved in this? You need to understand who are my stakeholders for this particular initiative. And this is what understanding your stakeholder are things you do when you are about to start your business analysis activities during your business analysis planning and monitoring, right? Where you have your stakeholder engagements. But we're still going to talk about stakeholder here as well. So understanding the expectation of the elicitation activity. You should know that the elicitation activity is for you to get understanding of the business need, understand the business process, the risks, the assumptions, understand if there are other conditions affecting that particular initiative. Also, possible sources of your business analysis information that might feed into the elicitation activity, and then the strategy or solution approach. So understanding the scope of elicitation activity allows you, the business analyst, to respond to the stakeholders in case they are straying away from the activity's intended scope. It also helps you to recognize if people and material are not available at a particular time and when the activity is actually complete. So if you be able to understand the scope of elicitation activity, the next thing for you then is to select an elicitation technique. You need to understand that it's not all the techniques that are suited for every elicitation activity. What do I mean? If you want to have a if you want to elicit a technical requirement, the best way to elicit technical requirements is through workshop. You can't be using surveys and questionnaires to elicit your technical requirements. You have to use workshop to elicit your technical requirements. So you need to know that not all techniques are suited for every elicitation activity. Most times, the type of elicitation activity that you select will be based on a number of factors, on so many factors, such as the nature and availability of your stakeholders, such as the urgency and the nature of the initiative. And choosing the right techniques and ensuring each technique is performed correctly is extremely important to the success of the elicitation activity. Techniques commonly used in similar projects are things you have to consider when you want to make a choice of elicitation technique. Maybe you've done an e-learning portal for UBA group or UBA bank, and now you have your company Uptrust has implemented an e-learning portal for UBA group or for Stanbic IBTC group, and now Access Bank group wants us to implement an e-learning portal for them. We can, as a business analyst with Uptrust, you can basically use the elicitation technique you used when you were implementing that solution for UBA and Zenith Bank that was successful. You can use those same technique for Access Bank, or you can even use techniques specifically suited to the situation. So even though we have done something like this for Access, for UBA Group and for Zenith Bank, we can see that probably that one we need to do an on-site implementation, but this one might be a virtual implementation. Then you have to use a technique that is suited for that specific situation, which is a virtual, right? Now, the tasks needed to prepare, execute, and complete techniques need to be considered when you are selecting your elicitation technique. Now, the next thing then is to set up logistics. Logistics is very important. Logistics in terms of what things do I need to be ready for this elicitation to be successful. So if you're having an on-site elicitation, you need to understand that hope there's an available office that we could have the communication, an office room, right? That we could have the elicitation. You should be able to have a place you've written down the elicitation goals. You have the place whereby you've written down the participants of the elicitation and their roles. You need to know what are the resources that are needed in terms of the rooms that you're going to use for the elicitation. What tools do you need? If you want to do survey, then you need a survey tool, probably SurveyMonkey or Microsoft Form or Google Forms, right? What platforms do I need if the meeting is going to be online, Zoom or Microsoft Teams or Google Meets? If it is Zoom, I hope I'm going to use a subscribed version of Zoom so that I won't have a limited time to work with my stakeholders. So you need to understand all of these things. You also need to understand logistics in terms of location. Where will the elicitation occur? Through what channels are you going to maintain communication? Should it be verbal or should it be written? What techniques are we going to use? So logistics may also involve you creating an agenda for the stakeholders. And this is what I do, basically. Whenever I want to elicit requirements, right? Especially if it's an external client, even internal client as well. What I do basically is I draft out an agenda and then I prepare a mail, that is a mail, and send to the clients. In that mail that I'm sending, I have the elicitation agenda in that mail. As part of the mail, I have the scope of elicitation in that mail and the activities of the elicitation we are performing in that mail, so that customer is stakeholders are well prepared and they understand what I will be doing with them. So once you be able to do that, to secure supporting materials, as I mentioned, supporting materials could be historical data, could be policy documents, could be systems, right? For instance, you could say you could get supporting materials in the sense that since we've done e-learning portal for Zenith Bank Group and UBA Group, I want to do it for Access Bank Group, you can get the documentations we use for the other client as a supporting materials to guide you on how to talk about the various business processes. And after you secure the supporting materials, you need to prepare your stakeholders. As I mentioned, before I do any elicitation, I try to prepare my stakeholders. It might be through mail, give them information of what the elicitation is about, what the scope of the elicitation is about, these various activities that will be performed during the elicitation, and what we hope to the benefit or the goals, the expectations from that elicitation. So these are some of the things I inform the stakeholders ahead of time before I even start engaging them in requirement elicitation. In this way or in that way, they are very much aware of what we want to do or what I want to do as a business analyst. So the next thing then, after you have prepared for elicitation, you've prepared yourself, prepared the stakeholders, prepared materials, selected the technique you're going to use, is then to now conduct elicitation. And in conducting an elicitation, it means you're carrying out elicitation. That's basically what conducting elicitation means. So carry out elicitation. And the purpose of conducting elicitation is for you to draw out, to explore, and to identify information that are relevant to that particular change or that initiative or that project or that solution. So in elicitation, feel free to explore, right? It's just like, for instance, when these oil firms when they discover oil, or when they are trying to see if there's oil in a particular area, they do what they call exploratory forgotten this. They kind of explore, right? And exploring, they are not limited. Their mind is not just stereotyped to one particular place. They are basically looking at different areas of the land, exploring the depths and all of that to see if they can find crude oil in that particular land. So that's what we do at that particular stage in business analysis. You are exploring, you are asking questions, proving questions, pruning questions, detailed questions, solution questions, business questions, stakeholder questions, user questions. So you are asking all of these questions during the point of exploration and during the point of elicitation. So that is why we conduct elicitation, right? And there are three different types of elicitation. Now, don't get it wrong or don't get it confusing. Types of elicitation is different from techniques of elicitation, right? All of the techniques of elicitation can fall into either one or two different types of elicitation, right? But we have basically three types of elicitation. Number one is collaborative. Collaborative involves direct interaction with your stakeholders, right? Number two is research. Research, you are not directly interacting with your stakeholders, but rather you are indirectly interacting with your stakeholders, which could be through surveys and questionnaires. You can also basically don't have to interact with any stakeholders, but you are interacting with the external world through Google research, right? Then the third one is by experiments. Experiment, you are trying to build a prototype, a sample of that solution. What do I mean? So we have implemented e-learning for Zenith Bank Group. We have implemented e-learning for what do you call it now? UBA Group. Now Access Bank wants us to implement an e-learning solution. We can take our requirement elicitation from this approach. Maybe we take a miniaturized solution of our e-learning, our miniaturized version of our e-learning solution, right? A small version of it, maybe a prototype of it, right? We can take that miniaturized version of our e-learning solution. We head over to Access Bank and we demo to them that prototype of our e-learning, how our e-learning actually works. We demo to them. After demoing to them how our e-learning actually works, then from there they can now begin to ask us questions. Oh, we don't need this thing. We need this one. You don't need this feature in your e-learning. We need this feature. Please add this feature. Please don't add this feature. In that way, you can begin to get responses to them in terms of what they need, the business need, in terms of the business process. Oh, we don't want our staff to take their trainings this way. We want them to take their trainings in another way, right? So that is what those are the three types of elicitation that we have. We have collaborative, we have research, and we have experiments. So now we'll dive straight into the various techniques in elicitation, the various elicitation techniques. And starting first off, we'll be using benchmarking. Benchmarking. I believe it's not the first time we are all hearing about benchmarking, right? As individuals, we must have heard about this one way or the other, or even in the course of the training, you must have heard me mention benchmarking. Benchmarking basically entails you looking outward, right? So let's say, for instance, Uptrust wants to build an e-learning solution, right? Or let me even not go as far as e-learning solution. The project that you guys are working on, right? Remember, I told you to do a competitor analysis, right? To understand the competition. And in turn, at the end of the day, this project should accumulate to you guys coming up with a new design for the Uptrust website. Now, that new design for the Uptrust website, you can't just dream and come up with it, right? You need to get ideas from how other platforms, how their websites are, right? Now, what you're basically going to do in that way to understand how other platforms are and see how to adapt Uptrust websites to it is what they call benchmarking. So you can basically benchmark other platforms or other businesses that you think are the top three. Benchmark their process or their websites or their strategy or their performance with what you want to do in Uptrust. So let's say, for instance, I say, okay, we need I will need you to prepare a requirement. I need you to elicit requirement through benchmarking for the Uptrust website or the Uptrust web application. What I basically want you to do is to look at any platform that you think is standard or is up there in terms of e-learning, in terms of training, right? And you believe that their platform, their website, their web application is top notch, is standard, is quality. All I need you is to go to those places and look at how did they structure their website, how did they lay it out, how is it performing, how is it appealing, what are the things that are there, and then see if those things could be replicated on Uptrust website. See if those things exist in Uptrust website. If they don't, do we need to have them? Should we not have them? So that is what benchmarking is all about. It involves eliciting requirements from existing solutions or existing businesses that have been considered to be standard. You're basically doing what they call comparison of their business process and their performance metrics. There are three types of benchmarking, or should I say three approaches to benchmarking. You can do process benchmarking. At this point, you are benchmarking against the process of that organization. You can do strategic benchmarking or strategy benchmarking. Here you are benchmarking based on their strategy. Now, if I should say process benchmarking could be related to through what process does customers make payments on their platform, right? So if a customer wants to make payments on Udacity, for instance, through how does Udacity lead a customer from the point that the customer comes to the website and customer makes a payment? So you're looking at process benchmarking. If I want to say strategy benchmarking in that instance could be what is their design strategy that they use in capturing and also coordinating users that come on their platform, right? So you could be comparing their strategies, their business approaches, their business model. What business model is Udacity using? If you go to platforms like Udacity, ideally it was Udacity that actually started it, but Udemy is also doing it now. If you go to Udacity and you click on a course, you will see they give you a deadline and say, after the next 5 hours, this course, the 15% discount on this course will no longer be available. They are using that FOMO strategy, FOMO model, which is fear of missing out, FOMO, to say, hey, come on, if you don't pay for this course now, you will stand the chance of losing 20% discount if you come back in the next 5 hours to pay for the course. But the fact is that that's 5 hours we're talking about. If you log in again in the next 5 hours, you realize that you have another 5 hours waiting for you. So for someone who is not aware of that, you could basically jump on the platform and you see a course you like and realize that you have a deadline to pay, else you miss out on getting a good deal. And you'll be prompted to pay. So what models are they using in terms of strategy for their customers? And then the last piece of benchmarking, which is performance benchmarking. You're looking at performance in terms of metrics. How well are they doing? How well is the platform doing? How engaging is the platform in terms of performance? If I want to move from one page to another in the Udacity website, how fast does it move? Do I have to, once I click, let's say I'm on the home page and then I click on maybe business analysis as a program, as a course I want to learn. For the page to load, will the page take 1 minute to load or will it take 2 seconds to load? We need to understand all of these performance measures that are within that particular business or solution we are trying to benchmark against, right? So for benchmarking, we have internal and external, and they all involves process benchmarking, performance benchmarking, and strategic benchmarking. Now, the next elicitation technique we'll be looking at is research. Research basically entails you building upon a collective body of knowledge. There are basically 4 approaches to research, but I'll say there are 2. Number 1 is the primary research, and number 2 is the secondary research. Primary research goes along with qualitative research, because in primary research, you are trying to get information from human beings, from people. So you are trying to get qualitative information, information that you can infer feelings, customers' ideology and thoughts process from. Then secondary research involves qualitative research. In this research, you are basically trying to get data, statistical data, that you can use to get understanding of of how well something is performing or how well it's going to perform, right? So that is what secondary research talks about, right? So the next type of elicitation technique we'll be looking at is interviews. Interviews. Interview is one of the most common type of requirement elicitation technique we have out there in business analysis. It's one of the most common and is more or less like the go-to research technique, elicitation technique that we have as business analysts. The thing is that once anybody hears that I'm doing elicitation, the first thing that will go to the mind of that person is, oh, is most likely is interviewing a stakeholder. So interview is one of the, or should I say, the most common or popular type of elicitation technique we have out there. And it basically entails you talking one-on-one, right? Interacting one-on-one with your stakeholders. So we want to implement e-learning for Access Bank. You'll basically be relating one-on-one with someone within Access Bank that is in charge of their learning and development. You have a one-on-one meeting with them. You have a one-on-one meeting with them to understand. You have a one-on-one meeting with them to understand what their business scope is, what the scope of the business, what they want the solution scope to be, the processes and everything. That is interview. It's a back and forth, free-flowing conversation, right? And this is where you choose to ask, is that structured or unstructured approach to it. Structured is that you want it to be defined questions. Unstructured is that you want it to be free-flowing and back and forth. It's best practice for you to share your interview notes with the person you interviewed after you have finished the interview, so that to ensure that there are no misunderstandings and also to jog the thought of the person that you interviewed for further insight. Now, when doing interviews, you need to ensure you start with open-ended questions. Open-ended questions are questions that start with who, how, where, when, what, why. And by the time you finish with your open-ended questions, you can then wrap up or summarize with a close-ended questions. Close-ended questions are questions that require the responder or the person you're interviewing to respond with yes or no, true or false. So let me say, for instance, I ask my open-ended question. That's okay. Assuming Nusrat is the person that is in Access Bank and I'll be interviewing her. I start with open-ended question and say, so I'd like to know who would be using this e-learning portal within Access Bank Group. Nusrat will say, oh, within our organization, we are going to limit this e-learning portal to strictly staff from level 1 to level 3, or staff from level 1 to level 4, right? I'll write that down. Write that down. I'll say, okay, why do you want this to only be for staff between level 1 to level 4? She'll begin to explain, she'll tell me a lot of information. Now, after I've been able to gather all the requirements and with my open-ended questions, and I want to close to get clarification, to get affirmations on what I've written, I will now say, so from what you've been saying, I understand that you want this e-learning portal to be accessible to staff between level 1 to level 4 because this range of staff are those that you want to actually invest in improving so that they can be able to give back to the organization by the time they get to level 5 in a much more managerial role? Yes or no? And she will answer yes, right? So I'm basically getting verification with my close-ended questions. But I started the interview with an open-ended question of who and then why. So where will they take this training from, right? Are they going to be taking this? Where do you want them to take this training from, right? They say, oh, where should they take the training from? The training should be virtual. So why should it be virtual? When do you want them to start taking the training, and how frequent should the training be? So I'm using my who, how, when, where, what, and why to gather a lot of information from my customers through open-ended questions. And then at the end of the day, I'll close it up with a close-ended questions. Now, the next interview technique we'll be looking at is workshop. Aside interviews and benchmarking, workshop is another common technique, commonly used technique that is used that we have in business analysis. Requirement workshops involves gathering a previously identified stakeholders in a structured setting for a defined amount of time in order to elicit, refine, or edit the requirements. In an agile world, workshop is synonymous to backlog grooming and sprint planning. That is what workshop is all about. We are grooming the backlog, and not everybody that comes in to groom the backlog. You basically have the team leads, the engineering team leads, right? The person in charge of the app, the person in charge of the back end, the person in charge of quality assurance, person in charge of design. We all meet together and then we discuss on the requirements in order for us to elicit more requirements, in order for us to refine the requirements, and in order for us to edit the requirements. For requirements workshop to be successful, it must include a recorder, that is a scribe. Today now, we basically don't have need of recorder because things are done virtually and you can basically record the workshop meeting. If it is on Zoom, you can do a recording and have it available later. If it is on Google Meets or Microsoft Teams, you can do a recording later and have it available, right? So you can have the recording available. In some organizations, workshops are called JAD, Joint Application and Design Session. Some workshops in other organizations are called backlog grooming, as I mentioned. Some are called FIS, depending on whichever one. When you get to any organization, you understand what your organization considers to be a workshop. Now, the next technique we'll be looking at is focus group, right? Is focus group. The difference between focus group and workshop, because in focus group, you're also gathering a group of persons, just as you're gathering a group of persons in workshop. The difference is that for workshop, you are focused on internal stakeholders. Internal stakeholders. That's what you are largely focused on, internal stakeholders. But for focus group, you are focused on external stakeholders. And for focus group, they are pre-qualified stakeholders. The number is rigid in the sense that you can't have a maximum, you can't have more than 12 participants and you can't have less than 6 participants. So the number of stakeholders in your focus group is between 6 to 12, right? And they are pre-qualified customers or pre-qualified stakeholders. But for your workshop, you are working with internal stakeholders that have technical capabilities or that are thought leaders within that project or that are considered to be leaders within that particular project. So focus group consists of a mix of pre-qualified stakeholders who gather to offer input on the business needs at hand and its potential solutions, right? For focus group, you are much more or less gathering high level requirements, but for workshop, you can even go as detailed as gathering technical requirements from your workshop. Now, the next technique we'll be looking at is brainstorming. This is also something that is common, even not just in business analysis, but even in secondary schools. When you're organizing a study group with your friends, your classmates, and people are brainstorming on a particular question that you've come across in a textbook. So brainstorming basically is a group activity or is a group creativity technique which allows participants to freely explore various dimensions of how to solve a particular problem within that project. So you are gathering a list of ideas spontaneously that is contributed by the participants. You have representative from these different stakeholders, from the different dynamics of the stakeholders. You need to ensure that your stakeholders remain focused on the business need and they don't stray away from the business need. Sorry, can you give me a minute, please?
Okay,
Just a minute.
no problem.
Can you guys hear me now? Sorry. Needed to attend to something urgently.
Yes.
But I'm back. All right. Cool. And you can see my screen, the presentation.
Yes, we can.
All right. Cool. So I've been talking about various elicitation techniques and talked about workshop, talked about benchmarking, interviewing, focus group, talked about research as well. So now we'll be looking at document analysis. Document analysis is also one of the important ways we gather requirements, right? And this involves reviewing all existing documentation that is pertinent to your business objective or that may hold data related to a relevant solution, right? So in document analysis, what we're basically doing is, let's say for instance, we have a learning and development policy document for Access Bank. We can analyze that document to understand the objectives of Access Bank in terms of learning and development, to understand the data of Access Bank staff that will be involved in learning and development, to understand the history of learning and development of Access Bank. We can also get a document with respect to reports from maybe a current platform they're using or a current way they're a way they're currently administering learning and development within Access Bank to know how effective it has been. What are the challenges? What are the pain points? Right? What are the achievements for those various processes and ways you have been doing that in the past. So document analysis is very important for us to understand what currently exists or what is currently happening in that particular initiative. And now the next one is surveys and questionnaires. This also, I believe, is not new to you guys. I believe in one way or the other, in your lifetime, you have filled a form. You have completed a form, either online or physical. It could be maybe when you are in school and you're doing your final year project and you need to do survey or you need to get questionnaires. You begin to, you come up with a list of questions and you share to people for them to provide you answers, and then you try to compare what they're responding to. Or it could be probably you are using a particular service, probably Google or Jumia or whatever. And then after using it, tell you to please, they'll send you a survey to help them provide feedback on how your experiences was. Right? So surveys and questionnaires are not new to us. And this is one of the key ways we also use to gather information over the years, over time. So surveys are very useful for quickly gathering data from a large group of participants. You know that you have almost 50 participants you need to get insight from. Most times, those participants will be users, right? You can come up with a survey. You can't meet those 50 one after the other. You can't have a workshop with 50 people. It's going to be so rowdy. You can't have a focus group with 50 people. It's going to be so exhausting, right? You basically come up with a list of questions or a survey, and then you share around to those 50 people, those 50 users, and they provide insights, they provide responses to the questions you have in your survey. In that way, you can analyze what they are feeling, what they are thinking, what their mentality and approach and objectives are, right? So surveys and questionnaires are very, very useful, and they're very, very important, and it's a means for us to basically gather information. When using surveys, you need to ensure that open-ended questions are useful for a broader discovery of the business need. However, when you have a large number of participants or respondents in your survey, you need to limit the number of open-ended questions you have in your survey. Because imagine if you have just open-ended questions in your survey and you have about 50 people responding to your survey, it will be difficult for you to understand the patterns, because it's going to be so cumbersome for you to analyze 50 documents that someone have written. Some people have written 2 paragraphs, 3 paragraphs. It's like your other tasks as a business analyst to perform, you have to put them on hold and do a lecturer's job of reviewing thesis that have been given to you by your participants, right? So you need to know how to compromise between number of open-ended and number of closed-ended questions in your survey. If you have just a few number of respondents or participants in your survey, then you can have more open-ended questions, right? When you have participants that are beyond 10, going to 15, 20, 30, 40, please do more of close-ended questions that will just require them to say yes or no, and then maybe 2% of open-ended questions just to get a thought on one or two things, right? Now, the next technique we'll be looking at is prototyping. As I mentioned earlier when I was talking about the types of elicitation, and I talked about experiments, prototyping falls under experimental approach to eliciting requirements. And it is very valuable to stakeholders such as business owners and end users who may not understand all the technical aspects of the requirements, but they will be better suited, or they'll be glad to relate to a visual representation of the end product. Stakeholders often find prototyping to be a concrete means of identifying, describing, and validating their interface needs. So the prototyping process is normally iterative, improving. As more input and evaluation are gleaned from the stakeholders, we end up ensuring that we improve the prototyping. So let's say, for instance, we go for the first session with our version of e-learning to Access Bank, and then we walk them through how the solution works, and then they give us feedback. We come back to the office, we implement their feedbacks, structure everything. We go back again, we do a demo. They look at it, they say, oh, this is close to what we actually want. There's something else we forgot to mention there, and I think is missing. Please add this thing here. And then you go back, we work, and then we go again to add what they want us to add until we reach at a point whereby we have completely delivered a solution that satisfies their business needs. So that brings us to the end of techniques that we use in elicitation. There are several techniques. All I did here was just to list out the commonly used techniques in business analysis. There are several techniques. There's functional decomposition. There's mind mapping. There's several of them that we use in eliciting requirements. So after you must have elicited a requirement, the next thing you have to do is to communicate your elicitation results. the result of your elicitation, right? So the purpose of this is for you to ensure that your stakeholders have a shared understanding of the business analysis information. Communicating your elicitation results, first of all, entails you confirming your elicitation results and ensuring that stakeholders are aware of the elicitation results. In communicating your elicitation results or to confirm your elicitation results, you can confirm your elicitation result by comparing your elicitation activity or elicitation result based on other sources of information. So let's say you have elicitation results. You've elicited requirements from the team in Access Bank. You can compare the results along with other sources of information, such as the existing system, such as existing documents, policy documents, right? You can also compare elicitation results against other elicitation results. What do I mean? So you have done elicitation, gathered elicitation, elicited requirements from what do you call it now? The head of HR in Access Bank. And you have also gone ahead to elicit requirements from the general manager of Access Bank. You can compare this elicitation result against each other, right? To ensure that it is consistent and accurately represented. What do I mean? If the head of HR said that their business goal is to cut down cost of training for staff by 2% in the next 2 years, and then when you are eliciting requirements with the business owner or the general manager of Access Bank, and it tells you that the goal of Access Bank is to cut down the cost of training by 10% in 2 years, you see that there's no consistency in that information. You have to see how to compare and then send the results, communicate the results to your stakeholders and tell them, okay, these are the results I've gotten from these two different stakeholders. I would like you guys to harmonize and tell me which should actually be the actual representation of the business need of Access Bank in terms of cost cutting for training. So these are ways you can basically communicate your results to your stakeholders. The next one will be for you to communicate with stakeholders and collaborate with them. So collaborating with your stakeholders is very key. This is one of the things that business analysts and product guys are known for. Something happened in my place of work recently. So there's something I normally tell my developers, right? And I tell them that if you are programming, if you are writing a code, if you are implementing a particular requirement with your code, and you are not clear or you don't understand what that requirement is about, feel free to ping me on Slack and tell me, oh, Genesis, please can you help me provide clarity to this particular requirement? And I will do that because collaboration should be an ongoing, continuous activity within an initiative. And I've always been clamoring for this for so many times. So this week, a mobile app developer within the team reached out to me. So I had a requirement I wrote that was 2 weeks ago. Yeah, 2 or 3 weeks ago. And the requirement had to do with for existing customers on the platform, all existing customers should be able to change from transaction password to transaction PIN. Do you understand? So what currently exists is that we have transaction password, and this was done before I joined the team. So I felt that, okay, instead of having transaction password, let us have transaction PIN. Transaction password is a 6-digit alphanumeric special character number password. But transaction PIN should just be a 4-digit numeric characters that customers can easily remember, right? Imagine if you are trying to perform transactions and you need to enter a 6 characters alphanumeric, 6 alphanumeric characters. You might end up forgetting it at some point. But if you have just a 4-digit, it will be easier for you to basically remember. Even by the time we launch our card processing by the end of the year, they can easily activate their card on the platform with their 4-digit PIN, right? So these were some of the business cases, or should I say the reason why we actually wanted them to change from transaction password to transaction PIN. And this was specifically for existing customers. And then I put out of scope. Out of scope is new customers setting up transaction PIN. So this guy began to build. And he began to build because he did not read through the requirements to understand the requirements. He just implemented for both existing and new customers. Now, when he has implemented for existing and he got to the point of implementing for new customers, they were not design. I did not attach designs for new customers because that ticket, or should I say that story, that requirement was exclusively on existing customers. So he had to reach out to, before he reached out to his team lead, Edwin. When he reached out to Edwin, then he reached out to me and said he wants to have a call with me to clarify something, that something is missing in the requirement. I said, oh, okay, let's talk. I'm glad at least you're able to reach out to me. So he reached out to me, and then I needed to clarify to him that, oh, come on, this requirement is exclusively for existing customers. We have a separate requirement for new customers. So you have basically gone out of the scope of this requirement to implement what is meant for another requirement. And I was like, oh, that I did not know that. I said, that is the beauty of you trying to collaborate, to reach out to me if you are confused on what you ought to do, because it's stated on the requirement, but due to your own, based on your own understanding, right, and not being able to consume and basically digest the requirement, you've gone ahead to implement out of scope. So I had to tell him to ensure he sticks to the scope, and I explained everything to him. I even went further to show him the other requirement that has to do with new customers setting up their transaction PIN. I showed them that the designs are available in those requirements. So those designs can't be in this requirement because they are for the other requirements. So that shows you the benefits of collaboration, because he could have gone ahead to implement, and then when the sprint is ending and he needs to come and demo what he has done, he will end up demoing something that is out of scope. And by the time we identified that, that would have been by next week, because next week, Friday, they should be demoing what they've done in this current sprint. So he would have wasted about 8 to 9 working days of doing out of scope requirements. But this is something that he was able to reach out to me on Wednesday, and I clarified to him. Thereby, he was able to make adjustments and deliver the work. So what we'll be demoing on Friday will be something that is in line with what I have given to him to do. So that is why collaboration is very, very important. And that's why I keep hammering it to you guys. In this project you guys are doing, learn to collaborate, learn to reach out. If something is not clear to you or is confusing or challenging, reach out at that moment. It's better for you to reach out and get clarity, get understanding, so you can do the right thing, rather than waiting till maybe 4 days or weekend when I'll have to review your work, and then you've wasted almost 3 or 4 or 5 days without doing the right thing or doing something close to what is right? So collaboration is key for you as business analysts, and you have to learn that collaboration even at this point. You have to start building that competence, that capability to collaborate. Want you to get clarity, to understand, to communicate. You've done something, you send it across. Oh, this is what I've done. How far? Is it okay? What should I add? What should I remove? Does it satisfy your need? Does it satisfy what's the objective of this? Get feedback, get collaboration with your stakeholders. It will help you to improve. It will help you to deliver quality work, right? So collaboration has to do with managing stakeholder collaboration is an ongoing activity, right? And even as you have new stakeholders, you need to understand who are these new stakeholders. Yesterday, we have some new guys joining the team, and we did a little bit of introduction to understand who you are and how will I be of service to you as a product owner, as a business analyst. So understanding your stakeholders is very, very important in ensuring effective collaboration with your stakeholders. When you have a poor relationship with your stakeholders, this can have many detrimental effects on the business analysis activities, including failure for them to provide quality information, resistance to change, lack of support, strong negative reactions to setbacks, business analysis information being ignored at the end of the day. So I have gone ahead to prepare a sample open-ended requirement elicitation questions for you guys to consume, to use, right? At any point, not just only in the course of this training, even when you get a job and you want to go for elicitation, you can jump on these sample elicitation questions to use them to start. So I have the who questions, right? Let's say, for instance, we want to do that e-learning for Access Bank. Who questions will be questions you'll be asking to Access Bank, such as who will be using a system, right? Who will be using each process in the system? Because we have different processes. We have the process of learning, we have the process of tracking and monitoring staff learning. So who will be using each process? Who can have access to what data? Who can provide this information? Who will initiate this process? Who will approve this process? Who has the privilege to terminate the process? Who does the upload of data, or who does data upload? Who are your partners? Who are your major competitors? Who are we providing these services to? There are several other who questions, but these are some starting points for who open-ended questions. Then we have the next one, which is how. How does users complete these tasks? How is this data stored? How will users have access to this solution? How will this solution provide value to users? How do you measure success? How have you been doing this in the past? How do you want this to be done in the future? How long will it take to complete this process? How long will this service last? How should the reports look like? How much do you estimate as a potential revenue for this particular project? Right? Then we have another open-ended question, which is the when. When wants to know about timing and frequency. When does this process start? When does this process end as well? When do users perform this action? When will the application be launched? Or when will users have access to this data or information? Why do you need users? This is a why question now. Why do you need users to complete these tasks? Why should the process start from here and why should the process end here? And there's what we call the 5 why techniques. 5 why techniques basically entails you asking why 5 times. So I tell you, okay, let's just practice the 5 why techniques real quick. Who wants to volunteer? One of you should volunteer. I put there. Someone should volunteer. Let us practice the 5 why techniques. All right, Obid. So let's practice the 5 why techniques. Mr. I don't want to volunteer. Obid should go ahead.
Obed should go ahead. I'll do after him.
All right, Obid. They say we should not do ladies first. They say we should do men's first. All right. So okay, I remember there was a time you told me that you're trying to start a co-working space, right?
Yes.
So why do you want to start a co-working space?
Looking to provide an enabling environment for young programmers.
Why do you want to provide an enabling environment for young programmers?
So as to be able to do away with all unnecessary hitches affecting programming, such as lack of adequate electricity, commuting, and so on.
Why do you think these unnecessary hitches are affecting programmers?
It's affecting the quality of work programmers are providing in the tech space.
Why do you think it's affecting their quality of work?
As a result of these hitches, many of our programmers are finding it difficult to find work in the international space, and it's affecting our reputation.
Okay, so I've just asked you 4 why, and you've been able to get to the root cause of why you want to start up a co-working space. You want
Yes.
programmers to be able to get international jobs and work efficiently for international jobs, right? So you are not doing co-working space because you want to provide something for programmers, but your goal is for your staff, for your customers to work efficiently, right? So everything you want to do as a business should be centered around this goal. This is what the 5 why. I could go ahead to ask you the last why. 5 why techniques is used to get to the root cause of an idea or of an initiative. If I meet you now and say, okay, you come to me and say, Genesis, I want to eat. And I ask you, why do you want to eat? You say, I want to eat because I've not eaten in the morning. I have not, the last time I ate was in the morning, and this is afternoon. I ask you, why do you think you need to eat in the afternoon? Right? I need to eat in the afternoon so that I don't go hungry and I won't get ulcer. Why do you think if you miss eating in the afternoon, you will get ulcer? Well, medical doctors say that, or medical practitioners say that if one don't eat regularly, there's higher chances of getting ulcer. So you mean if you skip one meal as a lunch, that you are going to get ulcer, even though you skip lunch and eat dinner? Well, I may not be eating dinner. I just want to eat lunch. So that is very important for me. Oh, now that is now the root cause of why you want to eat, because you know you will not be eating dinner, so you want to eat lunch. So not because of ulcer. It's basically because you know you'll not be taking dinner, or you'll be taking lunch. So you want to take that lunch. Do you get the point now? So 5 why technique is used to get to the root cause. So in the course of your requirement elicitation interview with your stakeholder, and you're not so convinced with what they have told you as why they want that solution, why they want what their business needs are. Someone tells you that you want to be to cut cost by 10% in the next 2 years. You ask them, where do you want to cut cost? Or why do you think this solution will help you to cut cost? They give you an answer. You ask them again, why do you, based on what they've given you, get another why for them. In that way, you are driving the customer to the point of realizing what the goal should be for them. Do you understand? So let's go to other sample questions. So we have the where questions. Where questions tries to look at location, places. So where are your customers or users located? Where can your users have access to this information? Where do you want this data or information to be stored? Where is this data fetched from? Where will this action be performed? Where do you currently perform this action? And where will this button be located? Then we have the what questions in terms of what problems are you solving? What type of data will be stored on the system? What data types will be exchanged within the system, right? What other systems will this system communicate with? What is the definition of done? What is your current business process? What is important to your organization? What are your key metrics? What reports are generated for making informed decision? What are we going to be integrating to? And what are users complaining about? So that brings us to the end of the session for today on requirement elicitation, or as some of my colleagues call it, requirement elicitation. I don't know if you have any question. I'll be very much glad to entertain so that we can run through them and come to the end of the class for today. No serious, Obed.
Okay, thank you for this session. I think I would appreciate it if I can get a copy of this, because it seems like it is a lot for me to digest.
Okay.
So I appreciate if I can get a copy, the soft copy.
Okay. So how do you want
Okay.
how do you want that? Because how I do is this, you see this material that I used to train you guys. See all the topics. At the end of the training, I'll send you a guide, a book that contains everything that you have done. Everything. Do you want it like this, or do you want me to be sending it class by class, whereby you now have different places? You don't know where you store some of them. How do you prefer it?
No, I prefer class by class. so that
Okay, you
it's
prefer a
easy
class.
for me to. Yes.
Okay. All right
Yeah,
then.
I'll open a folder so everything is going there.
All right then, no problem. I'll send it
Yes.
class by class to you guys then.
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Is that your question or is that your comments?
That's my comment.
All right, Obed. Thank you.
Okay, but as for me, I want it in bulk. I
All right,
don't
no
know
problem.
how you're going to do that.
That is the thing. Now, customer
Then
needs are insatiable. Customers have different needs, so that is interesting. All right, let's go.
I
Continue.
don't want
Continue.
to. I, I don't want to lose them chapter by chapter. I want to have everything together. Now, concerning this research requirement elicitation, not elicitation. I would like to know what you just gave us now are the do's. I want to know what are the don'ts because as a business owner, if somebody comes to my business to conduct a research and the person is asking me some questions that I find quite confidential, I will not be that open with such a person. So I want to know, as a becoming a business analyst now, how can I ask my questions in such a way that I won't tread on the foot of my uh, of those that I am interviewing, the
Okay.
interviewee, so to say.
Okay. Okay. Awesome. So it's a nice question. So the thing is, yes, right? If I'm coming to elicit requirements from you, it means that I'm coming to provide a service to you, right? Or I want to help, I want to provide you with a solution for something. It could be a B2B, business to business, whereby people have a client and you want to interview them, right? At first, that is why it's always good for you to prepare your stakeholders. Do you understand? Prepare your stakeholders will help them to understand this is what we want to do and this is why we want to do it. I'm coming to ask you about your business, not because I want to put you or take you off the market, but because I want to understand your business logic. So you don't go ahead interviewing your competitors. What do I mean? You want to set up a co-working space. You don't go and start interviewing co-working space owners because the questions you ask them will make them know that this guy wants to set up my kind of business. So do you understand? But rather, you can basically draft your questions in a way that will look as though you want to provide a solution for them. What do I mean? You want to set up a co-working space, right? You can ask questions like, you can look for another co-working space businesses around and maybe share a survey with them and ask them and say, what are some of the challenges that people face in this your business? Right? What are some of the challenges that people face? And they begin to tell you some of the challenges they face in the business. What are some of the things that customers complain about? They're basically telling you things that their customer complain about. So in your own business, you are going to be solving them. If you can solve those things that their customers are complaining about, you will take their customers. You don't even need to do a lot of adverts. Your customers will come to you directly. So knowing how to structure your questions, right, in order to get the best insights is key to a successful elicitation, right? But most times, elicitation techniques are done in what I call when you have a solution, right? And you need insights from stakeholders on how that solution should run. But what you're talking about now is what I call feasibility study and market research. And you want to now perform a research to understand how something is going on. To me, what I would say, those kind of questions that are delicate, you can ask them to the potential customers. Something like you ask the customer, do you currently use any co-working space? Customer will say yes or no. What are some of the challenges you face using a co-working space? Customers respond to you. Rather than you going to the co-working space owners to ask them, you can ask the customers direct. And customer will be ready to provide you all those information because the customer wants something that is good for him or her, right? So rather than asking the potential competitions that you have, you can basically do a benchmark for your competitors. Do you understand? You can basically do a benchmark from your competitors. Rather than interviewing your competitors, you benchmark against them. Then you interview your customers. Do you understand? So you need to understand which technique works for what, for which activity. If I have to get information about my competitors, I can research about them, go online. People like to talk about their successes. People like to talk about their challenges online, on articles. You go online, read articles about them, right? You can go on Twitter to see what people are talking about them. If it's a platform that is available on Google Play Store or Apple App Store, you can go on the store and look at their ratings, what people are talking about the application, right? In this way, you are researching, you are getting information. Am I able to provide clarity or answer your question?
Perfectly well, sir. Thank you.
All right, thank you so much. So that brings us to the end of the session today. Thank you so much. I'll stop recording so you can go to other things that we have to do.